Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're going underground, deep beneath the peaceful fields of northern France, to explore a place that whispers stories of survival, secrecy, and sacrifice across centuries. We're journeying into the chalky heart of Niort, a massive subterranean city, a ghost city carved from stone, that holds mysteries from the Middle Ages right through to the trenches of World War I. So, before we descend into this incredible labyrinth, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these explorations into hidden history. And as always, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see our global community joining us for these adventures. Now, dim those lights. Maybe get a fan going for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together, into the silent city of Niort. Beneath the peaceful wheat fields and sleepy roads of northern France lies something no one expects. A massive underground city carved directly into soft chalk. Just outside the village of Niort, near the Somme River, sits one of the most unusual archaeological mysteries in Europe. A sprawling subterranean labyrinth made up of over 300 rooms, stretching more than 3 kilometers in length. Descend just 33 meters and you're no longer in rural Picardy. You're in a ghost city carved into stone. It's easy to miss. On the surface, there is only a small entrance on a wooded slope, but step inside and the cool air greets you like a secret. The passages widen, they twist, they open into hidden chambers, stables, kitchens, even a chapel. Some rooms are connected with long, low-ceilinged corridors. Others are isolated dead ends, perhaps meant for storage or something more secretive. It feels less like a cave and more like someone turned the underworld into a village. What's most unsettling isn't just the scale. It's the silence of its origins. No definitive record tells us why or when the Niort complex was first built. Estimates suggest that construction began sometime in the Middle Ages, possibly between the 9th and 13th centuries. But was it meant as a refuge? A monastic retreat, or something else entirely? The walls don't say. One popular theory is that local monks or villagers began digging the tunnels as a way to escape Viking raids or later invasions during the 100 Years' War. It would have made perfect sense. The chalk is soft and easy to excavate, and the network is cleverly ventilated, meaning fires could be lit without suffocating occupants. It was also virtually invisible from above, making it the perfect hideout. Over time, the city beneath Niort evolved. Wells were dug, smoke chimneys were hidden inside tree trunks above ground. Horses were even stabled in the depths far from enemy sight. And yet, despite its engineering genius, the site vanished from collective memory until it was rediscovered by a priest and amateur archaeologist in the 19th century. And that's just the beginning, because what started as a potential medieval refuge would later become a sanctuary, a curiosity and a canvas for soldiers in one of the bloodiest wars in history. But down here, surrounded by carved walls and uncertain purpose, one thing is clear: Niort wasn't built in fear. It was built to endure. Walking through Niort is like stepping into the blueprint of an invisible civilization. The walls, cool and chalky to the touch, tell a story of centuries of carving done entirely by hand, one swing of a pickaxe at a time. There are no traces of machinery, no signs of hasty excavation. Instead, what you find is precision, intention, and layers of human labor, generations shaping their own underground refuge. The soft chalk of the region, known as cray, made digging relatively easy, at least compared to harder rock. But the real challenge wasn't excavation. It was engineering. How do you build an underground settlement without collapsing it? How do you ventilate a multi-level network without anyone above noticing? The people of Niort figured it out. The rooms are arranged with uncanny logic. There are living spaces, small enough to warm with body heat or a fire, storage rooms where food could be kept cool for months, and communal halls that suggest some kind of organized, even planned society below the surface. Entire sections were reserved for animals, especially horses, indicating that whoever used Niort intended to live underground not for days, but for weeks or longer. Most striking are the ventilation shafts. Dozens of them snake from the depths to the surface, hidden among the trees and foliage above. Some were disguised with plants or debris to avoid detection by outsiders. The airflow they provided meant that people could cook, breathe, and survive. In secret, smoke from fires would drift away undetected, vanishing into the forest canopy. Evidence suggests the site may have taken centuries to complete, slowly expanded room by room as needed. There is no sign of forced labor or rapid construction. It appears to be a community effort, probably maintained and improved over generations. This was no military fort. No castle built by decree. It was a place born of necessity, cooperation, and quiet innovation. The craftsmanship is not luxurious, but it is efficient. Doorways are rounded. Ceilings are reinforced. Walls are smoothed, not crumbling, even without ornament. There's beauty in the geometry, in the repetition, in the sheer will it took to make this place real. And perhaps that's why Naurs has endured. It wasn't just carved from chalk. It was carved from a deep human instinct to protect, preserve, and prepare for the worst. What do you think it would feel like to live in such a place? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. All right. If you're intrigued by this hidden underground world, do me a favor and hit that like button. It really helps these stories reach more people. And if you haven't subscribed yet, consider doing so for more adventures into the unknown. While no definitive records exist to name the original builders of Naurs, whispers from history suggest a likely group of early tenants, monks. During the Middle Ages, northern France was no stranger to invasion, first from Vikings, then during later conflicts like the 100 Years' War. Monastic communities often stood on the front lines of instability, and many chose to carve sanctuaries beneath their chapels. Naurs, with its isolated location and sprawling subterranean space, fits that pattern almost perfectly. Clues supporting this theory lie in the layout itself. Among the hundreds of rooms, there is a central chapel, carved with a simple altar and arching ceiling. Though plain, it holds spiritual gravity. The room was clearly designed for congregational worship, with space for a small gathering, and even faint etchings along the walls, perhaps verses or symbols now lost to time. This wasn't a storeroom or a defensive bunker. It was a sanctuary in the truest sense. The monks may have started the carving process, but they didn't remain the only ones to seek shelter here. As the centuries passed and wars swept across the region, local villagers and peasants took refuge in Naurs. Entire families are thought to have hidden below during sieges or enemy raids, especially when mercenary bands or foreign armies passed through Picardy. According to local oral tradition, the underground city could accommodate up to 3,000 people at once. That's not just a refuge, that's a hidden population center, operating in total silence beneath the enemy's boots. Imagine the dark corridors filled with quiet whispers, the smell of smoke, the soft clinking of pots and tools, the occasional cry of a child, all happening beneath the surface while danger loomed above. And yet, despite the fear that likely brought people underground, Naurs offered more than safety. It offered dignity. People weren't crammed into caves like animals. They had rooms, passageways, space to breathe, pray, and wait. There were rules, organization, and probably a hierarchy. Who got which room? Who watched the shafts? Who rationed food? The answers are lost, but the design suggests social structure, not chaos. In many ways, Naurs wasn't just a hiding place, it was a parallel society, quiet, shadowed, and utterly self-reliant, built not out of luxury, but out of necessity, and in doing so, it kept communities alive, without anyone above even knowing they were there. For centuries, the underground city of Naurs quietly served its purpose, sheltering monks, villagers, and perhaps entire generations from wars and raids. And then, just as mysteriously as it had been carved, it vanished from memory. By the 18th century, few in the surrounding region even knew it existed. The entrance had been overgrown. The stories faded. The city below swallowed not by earth, but by time. How does a city disappear? Slowly, bit by bit. As peace returned to northern France, the need for subterranean refuge declined. People returned to farms and fields. Families grew more permanent roots above ground. Oral histories thinned with each generation. And eventually, no one remembered to tell the next child that beneath their feet lay an entire civilization of chalk. There's no record of its use during the Napoleonic Wars. No mention during France's Revolution. The 19th century passed with barely a whisper of the tunnels. It became local myth, a story for children, a cautionary tale about hidden rooms and ghostly monks, until one day in the 1880s, curiosity brought it back to light. A Catholic priest named Father Ernest Danicourt had an amateur interest in archaeology. He had heard the whispers. A shepherd boy spoke of a hollow sound beneath his feet. The locals thought he was mad, but Danicourt persisted. He began clearing away debris and brush at a strange depression in the land, and what he found shocked even the skeptics. Down in the dark, with only lanterns and rope, he uncovered rooms, hundreds of them, each more elaborate than the last. He was the first person in perhaps 150 years to walk those halls. He cleaned them, mapped them, and began cataloging the site. In time, he opened it to the public as a curiosity. Visitors arrived to see the city beneath the earth, wondering how something so massive could be hidden in plain sight. And yet, even Danicourt never fully understood its origins. The medieval timelines were speculative. The purpose of some rooms remained unclear. Why were some passages sealed? Who had carved the deeper, more narrow tunnels? The more he uncovered, the more questions rose from the chalky walls. Knowers had returned, but only as a puzzle, a hauntingly empty stage, with no actors left. A city remembered not through documents, but through silence, shadows, and rooms that had patiently waited for someone to come back. Just a few decades after Father Danicourt rediscovered Naurs, the peaceful fields of Picardy were torn apart by a new kind of horror, the First World War. Trench warfare turned northern France into a blood-soaked labyrinth of mud, barbed wire, and artillery craters, and while the war raged above, something extraordinary happened below. Naurs became a secret sanctuary once again. French, British, Australian, and even Canadian soldiers passed through the region as part of the Somme Offensive, one of the deadliest campaigns of the entire war. Many of them found themselves near the village of Naurs, and some were taken underground, perhaps for shelter, perhaps for curiosity, perhaps for a brief moment of quiet away from the thunder above. But they didn't just visit. They left their mark. On the soft chalk walls of Naurs are more than 2,000 inscriptions, carved carefully by soldiers. Names, ranks, regiments, dates, even hometowns. It became a kind of underground guest book, a human time capsule etched in stone. Some signatures are elaborate, complete with military insignia. Others are heartbreakingly simple. Tom, 1916. J. Carter, 14th Battalion. It wasn't vandalism, it was memory, written by men who knew they might never return home. Many of these soldiers were Australian, from the Australian Imperial Force. Their graffiti is among the most numerous. Historians believe soldiers were brought to Naurs for brief rest periods or as part of local reconnaissance. The site may have reminded them of home, of cave systems like the Jenelin Caves in New South Wales, or maybe it was just the sheer wonder of stepping out of trench hell into an ancient city of stone. Some carved dates just days before the Battle of the Somme began in July 1916. Many of those names never made it back to Australia or England or Canada, but their writing did. Their presence still lingers in the dim corridors. Not ghosts, but echoes. In recent years, researchers have used these inscriptions to trace family histories and even reconnect descendants to soldiers lost in the war. Naurs, once a forgotten refuge, became a living memorial, not through monuments or parades, but through handwriting, scratched into stone by men facing the abyss. Down here, amid the silence, their words still whisper, "I was here, I mattered. Don't forget me." What makes Naurs so haunting isn't just its vastness or mystery, it's the graffiti. Thousands of inscriptions carved into the chalk walls, not by medieval monks or refugees, but by soldiers of World War I, young men trapped in a war that had erased any sense of normalcy. These weren't random scrawls or mindless doodles. They were deliberate, careful, and intensely human. A name carved into stone becomes a voice refusing to vanish. Over 2 dozen such inscriptions have been cataloged so far, most of them bearing names, ranks, battalion numbers, and dates. Some are precise. P. Fenreich Kelly, 3rd Battalion, AIF, March 1916. Others are more cryptic. Just initials, a year, maybe a single word like home or peace. The chalk walls became a canvas for memory, each letter scratched out with the same discipline they applied to their rifles. Many soldiers carved their names in clusters, groupings of men from the same battalion, often side by side. In one section of the tunnels, Australian soldiers from the 1st and 2nd Divisions carved entire walls, turning them into unofficial regimental memorials. It wasn't about ego. It was about being remembered. In the chaos of war, there was something grounding about leaving behind a mark, an act of quiet defiance against the oblivion of death. Some went further. They carved their hometowns, Sydney, Perth, Manchester. They scratched crosses, kangaroos, or military insignia into the walls. A few even etched short messages. "Goodbye, France," one soldier wrote. Another simply carved, "Still alive." And then there are the dates, many of them in 1916, just weeks or even days before the Battle of the Somme, where tens of thousands would be killed within hours. The eerie proximity of these peaceful carvings to the slaughter above makes Naurs feel like a moment of suspended time, a breath before the storm. Today, these inscriptions have become the focus of military historians and genealogists. Names once lost to history are being reconnected to families. Some descendants now walk the same tunnels, tracing the same letters with their fingers, knowing that their grandfather or great-uncle stood here, laughed here, maybe wept here, before climbing back into the noise of war. Naurs is no longer just an archaeological site. It's a living document, carved not in paper, but in stone, a place where voices from the past still linger, refusing to be forgotten. After the Great War, Naurs fell silent once more. The soldiers were gone, many of them forever, and the underground city returned to its quiet, chalky gloom. The names they carved faded under layers of dust, soot, and moisture. The once active tunnels became a curiosity again, visited occasionally, but mostly forgotten by history. Peace, it seems, also has a way of burying things. In the decades that followed, the underground complex saw sporadic attention. It was reopened to the public during the interwar period and again after World War II. Tourism brochures in the 1950s and 60s advertised Naurs as a quaint medieval oddity, La Cité Souterraine, but few truly understood what they were walking through. Most visitors wandered through the dim corridors without realizing that they were brushing past the names of thousands of soldiers etched silently into the walls behind them. Worse still, the site began to suffer from neglect and casual damage. Lighting installations scorched the delicate chalk. Graffiti and modern markings were added, sometimes right next to century-old inscriptions. Dust, mold, and vibration from tourism slowly eroded parts of the structure. And all the while, the true historical significance of what lay within remained buried under souvenir shop interpretations and surface-level storytelling. The inscriptions were there, hiding in plain sight, but no one was really looking. It wasn't until 2014, almost a full century after World War I, that Naurs would reclaim its voice. A team led by Gilles Prilot, a French archaeologist, stumbled upon the extent of the soldier graffiti while conducting a routine survey of the site. What he found wasn't just a few scattered names. It was a vast, undocumented war archive. carved by hand. He realized that Naurs wasn't just a medieval refuge or a tourist stop. It was a time capsule, a spiritual annex to the war itself. This discovery reignited interest in Naurs. Conservation efforts began, digital scans were made, and the graffiti was cataloged for historical research. Families from as far away as Australia and Canada came to see the signatures of ancestors who never returned. Still, the silence of those lost decades lingers. For nearly 100 years, the most poignant messages in Naurs were hidden, not by secrecy, but by neglect. And perhaps the greatest tragedy is not that the soldiers carved their names into the stone, but that we forgot to look for them. The 2014 rediscovery of Naurs' wartime graffiti changed everything. What had been marketed as a quirky underground attraction was suddenly recognized for what it truly was: a sacred record of lives interrupted, carved into the earth by men preparing to die. Overnight, Naurs was transformed from a tourist stop to a site of international historical significance. Leading the rediscovery was archaeologist Gilles Prilot, whose work began as a simple preservation study. But as he and his team ventured deeper into the tunnels, they realized they weren't just cataloging medieval architecture. They were standing in a World War I archive, inscribed not on paper, but into the walls themselves. The team found over 2,000 names, many from the Australian Imperial Force, meticulously carved into chalk between 1916 and 1917. Prilot described it as the largest underground concentration of First World War inscriptions ever found. It wasn't just a few soldiers passing through. It was a steady stream of men taking shelter from the war above and leaving behind their final thoughts in stone. The discovery sparked an international response. Researchers began cross-referencing the names with military records, identifying individuals, units, and fates. Families in Australia, the UK, and Canada were contacted. Some learned for the first time that their grandfathers or great-uncles had passed through Naurs. Others discovered that the names on medals and telegrams were etched into chalk half a world away. Meanwhile, efforts to restore and preserve the site accelerated. Sections of the underground city were scanned using 3D imaging. Lighting was improved to protect the chalk walls, and interpretive displays were updated to reflect the site's new significance. Portions of the inscriptions were sealed off from visitors to prevent further erosion. What emerged was not just a story of archaeology, but one of reconnection. People came to Naurs not to marvel at stone walls, but to touch history, to trace a carved name with their fingertips and feel, just for a moment, the heartbeat of a long-dead soldier. It wasn't just about honoring the dead. It was about listening to what they left behind. Through these efforts, Naurs was no longer a forgotten footnote. It became what it always was, a message in the dark, waiting patiently for the world to remember. Today, the underground city of Naurs is more than just a marvel of medieval engineering or a relic of wartime memory. It is a symbol of resilience, human creativity, and the strange intimacy between survival and silence. It stands not as a monument to one moment, but as a layered palimpsest of human history, each corridor echoing a different era's fears, hopes, and choices. What began as a possible monastic hideaway evolved into a full-fledged subterranean refuge, then into a forgotten curiosity, and finally into an accidental war memorial carved by its own witnesses. In this way, Naurs defies classification. It is not just a historical site. It's a psychological space, a place that has housed prayer, fear, routine, and rest across centuries. The cold chalk walls have absorbed the breath of monks, villagers, and soldiers alike. Each left something behind. In the modern era, Naurs has become a place of reflection, especially for descendants of the World War I soldiers who inscribed their names there. Visiting the tunnels today isn't like entering a battlefield or a museum. It's like entering a shared memory, one that was once buried and now breathes again. You walk not just through stone, but through testimony. It has also become a site of collaboration between nations. French and Australian historians now work together to cross-reference inscriptions with military records. School children are brought through the tunnels to learn about history in the most visceral way possible, by seeing what someone else carved with their own hands during a time when they weren't sure they'd survive the week. Perhaps most powerful is what Naurs teaches us about legacy. It was built not with glory in mind, but out of necessity. Yet it endured, and over time, its quiet persistence became its strength. It reminds us that history isn't just told in speeches and statues. It's whispered into chalk, hidden in dark corners, waiting patiently for someone to remember. Naurs is not loud. It doesn't shout, but it endures. And in doing so, it speaks to the enduring human instinct to carve meaning into the places we fear the most, and to leave behind a mark that says simply, "We were here." What an incredible story, layered through time. From medieval refuge to a World War I memorial hidden in plain sight. What do you think is the most powerful aspect of Naurs? Is it the mystery of its origins, or the poignant messages left by the soldiers? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the underground city of Naurs. If you found this story as moving and fascinating as I did, please hit that like button. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications so you don't miss our next exploration into the hidden corners of history. Until then, keep exploring and stay curious.